on this computer. Hi, welcome everyone. Today's vlog is with Darren Owen of Mobius Capital. They are a specialist firm with employee ownership trusts. And I spoke to Darren the other day. He did sound like the most interesting and fascinating person. So I thought it would be good to get him on the vlog and just have a chat with him. So, Darren, for the benefit of the audience, would you like to tell me a bit about you, your firm, your background, etc.?
Okay, so first of all, the firm Mobius Capital we set up last year. We have an intention to buy 100 businesses over the next 10 years using employee-owned trusts as the main owner of the business. What we're doing is actually assisting businesses to sell their business majority to the EOT and minor shareholdership to us, which then allows us to create a group of individual independent businesses that can work collaboratively together to then share resources to build up a better business and show how businesses can run more efficiently and better for everybody, for all stakeholders, including the local economy and local community.
Brilliant. That sounds really good. You say minor shareholding for you. Do you give anything in return for that shareholding?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different purchase methods. So we as a normal purchase, we will actually buy 26% of the business.
All right. Okay.
So we're looking to buy in 26% of the business, and the shareholders the EOT will become the other shareholders at 76%.
Wow.
Generally speaking,
minority shares. That you're a brave man. You're a brave man. So not
well,
for the faint.
It's. I have this conversation a lot. A lot of people within mergers and acquisitions think I'm crazy because why would you want to take the risk with a business that you don't actually control? However, control is it's a marvelous thing if you've got all the time in the world to do it. And actually, if we could sit back from running the business day to day and actually sit there as a controlling interest, but letting the business control themselves and actually allow them to make decisions, but helping them to make better decisions, we can be seen as the friendly uncle, the friendly advisor that actually comes in and assists rather than dictates how the business is now going to run.
Right. There are all sorts of horror stories about venture capitalists dictating to entrepreneurs who set up their own business because they didn't want to be dictated to. Anyway, right, enough of that. So, right. So, for those, some of our audience won't be familiar with the EOTs. They seem relatively new. Tell me about some success stories when they're good, that sort of thing.
So, EOTs are still relatively new. They started in 2014 by the government. So they've been around for good, 9 years now. But there's only about 600 EOTs in the UK. So one example, there's a company in Sheffield. Sheffield seems to be a nice hub spot for EOTs. There's quite a few of them in the area. But the small company, they produced ceiling connectors so you can hang ceilings from anything. And they sold their business to an EOT, and now that business is extremely growing really fast because they're now working in a different way of working. The owner previously they set up, it was a new idea, new business. They sold to the staff, transitioned all the shares to staff at 100% ownership. The owner stayed in the business and grew that business, but now they've actually produced a trust within the trust where they actually spend money in the local economy to build the local economy up as well. So there's lots of positives around what they do. There's also companies that we've heard of that follow the same procedures. So John Lewis partnerships, for instance, EOTs were based upon the John Lewis partnership. So you can use John Lewis as another example of businesses that have been very successful in their time because of the EOT process. And although they started way before employee-owned trusts, their partnership process is very much in line, and how they run their partnership is used as a model within employee-owned trusts. And that in itself is a very good example of how EOTs can run and can run for a long term.
John Lewis is well known and well respected. Both my sons used to be trolley boys for Waitrose in their adolescence.
Yes,
and they got the bonus, and it made them the best paid trolley boys in Witney, where we were then living. So, and I have another son who works for an employee ownership trust in Cardiff. Well, he's in Cardiff, but it's based all over the world. and that again works really well. It retains staff brilliantly. So, okay, but also I hear some horror stories about EOTs, and
Yeah,
sometimes they're not right for people. Tell me about
no.
your experience of horror stories and the problems to avoid.
So one was, strange enough, I was speaking to a colleague the other day about employee ownership. He's an M&A person, so he brought the company himself, and he sold his business to the employees as an employee-owned trust as a way of exiting himself. And within a year, he was called back into the business because the neighbors were saying they've shut up shop. So he went
Right.
back. He went back to the
Okay.
factory, and the
Yeah.
staff were leaving the factory with all the equipment, saying we're
Wow.
going to shut the company down next week, so we may as well take what we can.
Yeah.
And the managing director and the leadership team were up in the boardroom fighting.
What, literally fighting?
Literally. And he said that the problem was when they were working together, they worked very well together, but they had a leader at the top to say, no, we go this way or we go that way.
Yeah.
And the problem was that what he didn't realize is that the two leaders were going in two different directions and wanted to do two different things with the business.
Yeah.
So their vision for the business moving forward was complete opposites.
Yeah.
And that the managing director before he sold it was in a good position because he had the best of both worlds. He would go left one time and right the other, and whoever had the best idea at the time would actually win.
Yeah.
But when the two were then put in charge,
Yes,
all you had was struggle. It was consistent fighting and infighting, and we need to go this way. No, we need to go that way. And they ended up not going in either direction.
Yeah.
And the business suffered quite dramatically, and they ended up not paying the bills, not paying the suppliers, losing credit and all this kind of stuff.
All the staff walking out taking the equipment sounds like administration or liquidation was imminent. So yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So fighting in the ballroom, that's not very clever, really, is it? It's not a good way of making money. What would you say causes those problems? What do you need in an employee ownership trust to make it work well?
So the main thing there, and I think this is an example across a lot of the failures, is poor leadership.
Yeah.
And not really understanding who you've hired as a leadership team, because at the end of the day, a business is like a boat. You need a rudder and you only need to steer in one direction. If you install two rudders on a boat and they both went in opposite directions, you would go nowhere. The boat would stop.
Yeah.
And what they do is when you're just passing over to your team, if you've got an even number of people and they are complete opposites and they've gone into two different fractions effectively, you're causing more heartache for the team, but also more problems, because most businesses have a leader who sits above all that and says, no, we're going to go left, we're going to go right, and changes their direction depending on which way they see the best option.
Yeah.
And if you remove that, you effectively make the ship rudderless, and it starts to sink very quickly.
Okay. Or goes around in circles or whatever.
Or goes in circles, yeah.
Yes.
And one of the other problems is that, as John Lewis is a good example of this, people don't leave, which is part of the benefit of an employee-owned trust.
Yeah.
But if you've got a business, it needs to be dynamic. It needs to be able to change with the times. And one of the things that I've really looked into is, how do you run a 100-year business?
Yeah.
A business that lasts 100 years has to outlast every member of staff that's in that business.
Yes.
Which means you need to keep replacing staff and bringing new blood in all the time. And that new blood wants change, and they want to implement new processes. John Lewis Partnerships, they've struggled recently because they've not been able to actually increase the amount of investment in the business. The staff are still voting for their dividends to come out.
Yeah.
And they've not reinvested money because it was seen as new and scary, and we don't want to go down that direction.
Yeah.
And they've ended up being in a situation where they've actually almost caused themselves to crash because no new young blood have come into the business. And it's very hard to replace staff when they don't want to leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and when you have staff that actually control the business as well, things like the normal process of, we'll make a load of people redundant, and then we'll start somewhere else and move the business, and we'll do this, and all that kind of stuff kind of becomes stopped.
Yes.
And it makes it a little bit harder. So my finding is that that's one of the biggest causes of problems within an EOT. And that's why we set it up with the idea that we'll be a a part of a larger group that could come in and assist that EOT. So if it needs further funding in the future, we'll help raise that funding and we'll become the funding partner of choice. But also we can offer staff the ability to jump ship out of the EOT and into one of our other EOTs and move, which means that they get the experience elsewhere. We can do secondments from one business to another so that they can gain more experience in the business they return to back to. And we can allow that growth of the business by actually retraining the staff. Most employee-owned trust will be a certain size and they'll retain that size and not look to grow, because growth is something that staff generally don't want to do, because that seems to be scary.
Yes. I remember once having staff saying, I was bringing in new customers and they said, no, we can only onboard 4 at a time. I said, well, I've brought in 6 new customers. Why won't you onboard, run parallel training courses? Don't you want to grow this business? And other such helpful comments. And in the end, the MD did exactly what good leadership. They stepped in and said, no, we run parallel courses, and the business grew very rapidly. So I've got a good friend who did an EOT. Would you advise strongly that they have a benevolent dictator at the top of a tree?
Not necessarily. Well, yes and no. So you can't have a dictator at the top of the tree because of the way the EOTs are structured. So the role of the dictator usually means controlling the interest, which is something that's not possible with the EOT. The EOT has to own at least 51%, so it has controlling interest in the business. It's handy if within that business there's a good, strong managing director. Because he or she could actually then steer the ship, even if the staff want to do something opposite. Because they can lead that role. But you having somebody that's external to that group also allows for that that balancing act. So for instance, when we take on a business, we look to have 3 members of staff on the board of directors representing the employee-owned trust. Those 3 people one of them won't be the managing director. There'll be an additional of the managing director. Now that leaves 4 people on the board of directors, which means there's a potential to have 2 of them wanting to go left and 2 of them wanting to go right. By having 26%, Mobius Capital also sits on the board, and we're that fulcrum. We could sit in the middle and say, actually, we're going to go left and we're going to vote with these people on the left, or we're going to go right and we're going to vote for those people on the right. And it allows us to become that final say in the process to ensure that we're going in the right direction. Now, obviously, if everybody decides we want to turn right, we have no say in the matter. Because we don't have that controlling interest. But as an external body and as a trusted partner, when they say we want to turn right, and we say, there is cliffs that way, and that you're going to be, that's not a lighthouse, it's that's a cliff. We need to be forceful in the way we sort of show them and lead them into changing their minds. But that means we have to then make sure that the managing director is competent in what they do, and we need to make sure that the staff who represent the staff are actually trained in how to make these decisions. The last thing you need is to have 3 members of staff who only ever bring forward onto the board that everybody needs a pay rise up to £1 million a day.
No, we don't want that. You only get £1 million pay rises if you earn £1 million pay rises, don't you?
Yes, exactly.
The idea.
And the benefit is we can then have that conversation with them. Do you want to have a pay rise and cause the business to struggle? Or do you want to keep the wages at a reasonable level, a living wage kind of level, but then make profitability better for the business and then increase their value that they receive from the business? So it's that measurement.
Going back to employees not liking change, and when we're a firm of business brokers, do you ever get a situation where you think that it would be better to sell the business rather than put it in an employee ownership trust?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that type of business where they don't. It wouldn't work for them,
Yeah.
and it's usually where they're either too small and
Yeah.
there's not enough people to make a decision, and the people that are in the business are not trained to make decisions about the business. So that's usually where there's a one single boss at the top, and
Yes.
they're the dictator. They've
Yes.
dictated every single thing, and everything's run through them, and that makes it very hard to then take over,
Yeah.
because you're effectively training the new managing director at the same time as trying to run the business, at the same time as trying to implement all these changes.
Yes.
And there's a lot of moving parts to actually implement an EOT.
Yeah.
For those businesses, there is a fix for that, which is to remove the managing director first and actually put in those processes before you go live. And
Yes.
that's one of the things we will help businesses with. So if the business isn't ready for an EOT, we'll help them prepare. And that
Yes.
includes growing a business to a point where it's actually got enough staff in the business
Yes.
that are all functional staff. You don't want to just hire 3 members of staff to make the numbers up and then realize that
Yeah.
your business doesn't actually need them.
Yes.
But you can actually then build the business up to a point where there's enough business, there's all the process and procedures are in place, and you've got more of a management style there.
Yes.
You've also got the way that some people run their businesses are not suitable for an employee-owned trust.
Right.
And those businesses usually attract people that would not be suitable for an employee-owned trust.
Yes.
So I've had an example where the manager was not just a dictator, but they were quite cruel in the way they ran the business.
Okay.
It was all about who shouts loudest gets the bread.
Okay.
That kind of animosity with staff bred a way of they were horrible to each other. They didn't work together. Everybody became in silos, and it was like us against them all the time.
Yes.
And for that business, the leader decided that was good for them, because it created an atmosphere where everybody was fighting for the best promotion or the best deal, and they were all fighting each other. But it doesn't work for an EOT where everybody's working collaboratively and working together to build each other up.
Right.
And if you've got a large business where you've got maybe different silos in the business, you
Yes.
don't want one cannibalizing another just to make a profit.
Yes.
And there is a lot of businesses that are like that, and they would not suit an EOT process before they've actually gone through a level of change first.
Yes. Okay. So right. So not too small, and the key is having the right people to be on as trustees for the EOT, really, isn't it? Because you need employees who think like entrepreneurs, and often that's a very different personality type and skill set, etc. And presumably you can bring those in, but if it's a small business, there's a limit how many people you can bring in. So
you're not going to be able to increase the staff of a 5-staff business by 10 overnight. It just wouldn't sustain it. And if it does sustain it, then what they've been doing up to now.
Yes. Okay, lovely. That's brilliant. Well, it's been fascinating speaking to you. I will tell the whole world about Mobius Capital, because it does sound like a very good product. And you might think we're in competition with you, but actually the key is always getting the right thing for the business, isn't it? Because if you get the right thing for the business, you stand a better chance of getting the right thing for the owner manager, and you get a better chance of getting the right thing for the staff as well. So and that's the key. And sometimes employee ownership trusts will work, and other times they won't. So
exactly.
Yes. Okay. Lovely. As I say, fascinating to speak to you. If anyone wants to get in touch with Darren, we'll put his contact details on my YouTube channel, but do reach out to me directly, and I will send you some contact details. Anyway, bye for now.
Thank you very much.
Let's just stop.